Galloway Springs, Arizona Territory, 1883. Finnian Ivers stood at the edge of town, dust swirling around his worn leather boots as the evening sun painted the desert in hues of amber and gold. At 24, he'd already seen more of the West than most men twice his age, but something about this small mining settlement felt different, like a place a man might actually want to stay. His chestnut hair caught the fading sunlight as he pushed back his hat, revealing sharp blue eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Finian's lean frame carried muscle earned from years on horseback, not an ounce of it wasteful or for show. 3 days' worth of light stubble framed a jawline that caused more than a few glances when he'd ridden in earlier. "This the place, Finn?" asked his companion, another dusty rider atop a paint horse. "Galloway Springs," Finnian confirmed, reading the weather-beaten sign. "Supposed to have steady work for experienced hands. Town's growing with the silver mine reopening." What he didn't mention was what he'd heard about the trouble brewing. Rumors of bandits eyeing the payroll shipments, of a town vulnerable despite its newfound prosperity. That wasn't what had drawn him here, but it certainly made things more interesting. Here they've got a real saloon, too. Not just some tent with rot-gut whiskey, his companion added with a grin. Finnian nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. "Let's find somewhere to bed down the horses. Then we can see what this town has to offer." What Galloway Springs had to offer became immediately apparent the moment Finnian stepped through the swinging doors of the Silver Dollar Saloon that evening. The place hummed with the energy of miners and merchants, cowboys and card players, but all conversation seemed to fade when she took the small stage in the corner. Her name was Penelope Keating, according to the barkeep, though everyone called her Penny. At 22, her voice carried both innocence and worldliness that seemed impossible to reconcile. Auburn hair cascaded down her shoulders in loose waves, complementing a forest green dress that hinted at curves without being improper. Even in this rough-edged town, she maintained a dignity that set her apart. "She came out west with a traveling show about a year back," the barkeep explained, noticing Finian's fixed gaze. "Show folded, but she stayed on. Best thing that ever happened to this place, you ask me." Finnian found himself unable to look away as her voice filled the room with a bittersweet ballad about lost love and distant horizons. When she reached the final notes, her emerald eyes scanned the room and, for the briefest moment, locked with his. Something passed between them, recognition of a sort, though they'd never met. The spell broke as the piano struck up a livelier tune, and the patrons returned to their conversations and card games. Finnian ordered another whiskey, but his attention remained divided. He didn't notice the 3 men watching him from the corner table, nor did he catch their whispered conversation. "That's him," one muttered. "Ivers. The one McCready warned us about." "Don't look like much," another replied. "Just some pretty boy cowboy." "That pretty boy shot 2 of Denton's men over in Tucson," the third hissed. "Tracked them for a week after they robbed that stagecoach. He ain't just some drifter." Their leader stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Well, if he's planning to stay in Galloway, that complicates things. Rawlins needs to know." As the evening wore on, Finnian found himself drawn into conversation with the local sheriff, a grizzled man named Thomas Grant, who seemed relieved to have another capable gun in town. "We're expecting the mine payroll next week," Grant confided after they'd established a rapport. "Word travels fast about such things. We've had incidents." "Bandits?" Finnian asked, keeping his voice low. "Organized ones. Call themselves the Rawlins Gang. Not your typical rabble. They plan, they scout, they have informants." The sheriff's weathered face tightened. "Lost 2 good men in their last raid. Could use someone with your experience, if you're planning to stick around." Before Finnian could respond, a commotion near the piano drew their attention. One of the miners, deep in his cups, had taken it upon himself to join Penny's performance. His slurred words and grabbing hands made his intentions clear. Finnian moved before he even realized it, crossing the room in long strides. He placed a firm hand on the miner's shoulder. "Evening's over for you, friend," he said quietly. "Time to head home." The miner turned, eyes unfocused with drink. "Mind your own business, stranger. I'm making it my business." Finnian's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes caused the miner to hesitate. "The lady doesn't appreciate your attention." For a moment, it seemed the miner might throw a punch, but the sheriff's appearance beside Finnian shifted the calculus. With a string of curses, The man staggered toward the door. Penny's gaze followed Finnean as he returned to his seat at the bar. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, before continuing her song without missing another beat. As the night wound down, Finnean found himself lingering, nursing his drink long after most patrons had departed. He told himself it was to ensure Penny's safety as she finished her final songs, but in truth, he simply couldn't bear to leave while she was still singing. When she finally stepped off the small stage, she surprised him by approaching his table. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Of course." Finnean stood until she was seated, a courtesy that earned him a surprised smile. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said. "Most men would have started a brawl. You handled it with discretion. No need for thanks. Any decent man would have done the same." Her smile turned knowing. "We both know that's not true, Mr. Ivers. Finnian Ivers. Most call me Finn. Penelope Keating. Penny to most." She studied him with unabashed curiosity. "You're new to Galloway Springs. Passing through, or staying a while?" The question was casual, but something in her tone suggested his answer mattered more than it should. "I came looking for work," he answered truthfully. "Might have found something worth staying for." Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from polite small talk to more substantial matters. He learned she'd come west from Boston, chasing dreams of adventure and independence that her well-to-do family couldn't understand. She discovered he'd been orphaned young and raised by an uncle who taught him to track and shoot, skills that had served him well as he made his own way through the territories. What Finnean didn't share was how often those skills had been used in the pursuit of men who preyed on others, stagecoach robbers, cattle rustlers, and worse. How he'd developed a reputation in certain circles as someone who could find those who didn't want to be found. What Penny didn't reveal was how desperately she'd wanted to escape the planned marriage her father had arranged with a business associate 30 years her senior, or how the traveling show had seemed her only way out. How she'd learned to survive by her wits and her voice in a world that offered few options to women alone. As they talked, neither noticed the lone figure watching from outside, peering through the window before slipping away into the night. Morning found Finnean at the livery stable, where the proprietor had offered him work breaking horses, a task that suited his skills perfectly. By midday, he'd tamed 2 spirited Mustangs that had been giving the man fits for weeks. "You've got away with them," the liveryman observed, impressed. "They trust you." Finnean wiped sweat from his brow. "It's about reading them right. Horses don't respond to force so much as understanding." "Well, whatever you're doing, I could use more of it. Job's yours for as long as you want it." The work was good, honest, and paid fairly, everything Finnean had hoped to find. Yet his thoughts kept drifting to the saloon singer with the auburn hair and clever eyes. Would she be performing again tonight? Would she remember their conversation, or had it simply been politeness to a stranger who'd intervened on her behalf? He got his answer sooner than expected when he spotted her crossing the street, a basket over her arm as she exited the general store. She wore a simpler dress than the previous night, pale blue cotton rather than shimmering green silk, but looked no less striking in the daylight. Their eyes met, and her face brightened with recognition. She changed direction, heading toward him. "Mr. Ivers," she greeted him with a smile. "I heard you'd found employment with Mr. Chambers. He's been complaining about those Mustangs for weeks." "Miss Keating." He removed his hat, suddenly aware of his dusty appearance. "Word travels fast in Galloway Springs. It's our primary form of entertainment," she admitted with a laugh. "That and my singing, of course. I can't imagine better entertainment than that." The words came out before he could check them, and he felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Perhaps you'd like to hear more tonight? I'm trying some new songs. I wouldn't miss it." Their conversation might have continued, but the rumble of approaching horses drew their attention. 6 riders entered the town, their manner casual but their eyes alert and assessing. Finnean recognized the type immediately, men who lived beyond the law, testing boundaries before making their move. "Friends of yours?" Penny asked, noting his sudden tension. "Never seen them before," he answered quietly, "but I know what they are." "Bandits?" she whispered, inching closer to him unconsciously. "Scouts, more likely." Looking over the town, he placed a protective hand on her arm. "Let's move out of the street." As they stepped onto the boardwalk, Finnean noticed something that made his blood run cold. The lead rider, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, was someone he'd encountered before, a known associate of the notorious Elijah Rawlins. The rider's eyes fell on Finnian, narrowed in recognition, then moved to Penny beside him. A slow, calculating smile spread across the scarred face before the man tipped his hat in mocking greeting and continued down the main street with his companions. Finn, Penny's voice pulled him back to the moment. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just someone I hope never to see again. He forced his attention back to her. Penny, you should be careful for the next few days. These men are here for the mine payroll, she finished his thought. Everyone knows it's coming. It's all anyone talks about. Finnian frowned. If everyone knows, that makes the danger worse. Sheriff Grant has been organizing men to help protect it, she said. Perhaps that's something else you could help with, besides breaking horses. There was something in her voice, a note of concern mixed with something deeper. I'm good at more than just horses, he admitted. And I've crossed paths with the Rawlins Gang before. Her eyes widened. Then you must speak with the sheriff right away. As they parted ways, Penny with a promise to see him that evening and Finnian with a troubled mind, neither noticed the scarred rider watching their interaction from the shadows between buildings. That evening, the Silver Dollar Saloon was more crowded than the night before, news of Penny's voice having spread beyond the town's usual patrons. Finnian secured a table near the stage, having spoken with Sheriff Grant about his concerns and offered his help with the payroll protection. When Penny appeared, she seemed to glow from within, her presence transforming the rough-hewn saloon into something almost refined. Her dress tonight was the color of sunset, amber silk that caught the lamplight and made her auburn hair shine like polished copper. Her first song was light and cheerful, eliciting calls for more from the appreciative crowd. But as the evening progressed, her selections grew more poignant, ballads of longing and separation, of hope and reunion. More than once, Finnian caught her gaze lingering on him during these more emotional performances. During a break between songs, as the piano player rested his fingers, the saloon doors swung open to admit new arrivals. The scarred rider from earlier entered, followed by two of his companions. They claimed a table near the bar, ordering whiskey and watching the room with predatory attention. Penny's face paled slightly when she noticed them, but she gathered herself quickly, stepping back to the piano for her next song. Finnian tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but the men seemed content to merely observe, for now. As Penny began to sing again, the scarred man leaned toward his companions, speaking low. Though Finnian couldn't hear the words, the way their eyes kept shifting between him and Penny made his instincts scream warning. The song ended to enthusiastic applause, and Penny announced she would take a longer break before her final set. As she stepped off the small stage, the scarred man rose and intercepted her, bowing with exaggerated courtesy. Miss Keating, he said, loud enough for Finnian to hear. Allow me to introduce myself. Jackson Farrell, at your service. Your reputation as a songbird doesn't do you justice. Penny's smile remained professional but cool. Thank you, Mr. Farrell. If you'll excuse me. One moment, Farrell insisted, blocking her path. My employer would be most interested in hearing you sing. He appreciates fine things and pays handsomely for them. Perhaps you'd consider a private engagement. The implied suggestion in his words was unmistakable. Before Penny could respond, Finnian was beside her, his presence calm but unmistakably threatening. The lady is otherwise engaged, he said quietly. Your employer will have to find his entertainment elsewhere. Farrell's scarred face twisted into something between a sneer and a smile. Well, if it isn't Finnian Ivers. Last I heard, you were chasing Comancheros down in the New Mexico territory. Times change, Farrell. People find new pursuits. Indeed they do. Farrell's eyes moved from Finnian to Penny and back again, calculating. Though some pursuits can be dangerous for those around you, Ivers. Something to consider. The threat hung in the air between them, made more ominous by its vagueness. Farrell tipped his hat again and returned to his table, but the message had been delivered. Penny's hand found Finnian's arm, her fingers trembling slightly. Who is he really? She whispered. Trouble, Finnian answered simply. And he knows me, which makes things complicated. For the payroll protection? For everything. He guided her toward a quieter corner. Penny, these men are dangerous in ways this town may not be prepared for. The Rawlins Gang doesn't just rob. They destroy communities that resist them. Her green eyes searched his. You fought them before. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Yes, in another town, farther south. It didn't end well for everyone involved. What he didn't say was how personal that fight had become, how Elijah Rawlins had sworn to make an example of anyone who stood against him, how vengeance was as much Rawlins' motivation as greed. Sheriff Grant needs to know what we're truly facing, Penny said decisively. And so do the townspeople who volunteered to help. Finnian nodded, surprised and impressed by her practical response to danger. I'll speak with him again tomorrow. For tonight, he glanced toward Farrell's table. I think you should have an escort home after your last songs. Are you offering, Mr. Ivers? The fear in her eyes had been replaced by something warmer, despite the circumstances. I am. She smiled, a private expression meant only for him. Then I accept. As she returned to the stage for her final set, Finnian noticed Farrell and his companions preparing to leave. The scarred man paused at the door, his gaze finding Finnian's across the room. With deliberate slowness, he drew a finger across his throat before disappearing into the night. The message couldn't have been clearer. Elijah Rawlins had not forgotten their last encounter, and Galloway Springs was about to become the stage for their reckoning. That night, as Finnian walked Penny to her small house at the edge of town, their conversation turned from immediate dangers to deeper matters. The stars overhead seemed impossibly bright, the desert air cool and clean after the smoke and whiskey of the saloon. How does someone like you end up hunting bandits? She asked as they strolled, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his arm. Finnian considered his answer carefully. My uncle taught me tracking when I was young, following game trails, reading sign. After he passed, I found those skills useful in other ways. There's good money in bounties, and not enough lawmen to cover all this territory. That explains the how, but not the why, she pressed gently. Most men with your abilities would be rustling cattle, not chasing those who do. He smiled at her perception. My parents were killed by raiders when I was 6. My uncle raised me right, but that kind of thing, it stays with you. Makes you want to ensure others don't suffer the same fate. Penny's hand tightened on his arm. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried. No, it's all right. Not many people I'd share that with, but with you. He trailed off, uncertain how to express the connection he already felt to her after such a short acquaintance. They reached her small house, a modest but well-kept structure with flower boxes beneath the windows, an unexpected touch of gentility in the frontier town. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked, her voice carrying a note of vulnerability that suggested the invitation was about more than refreshment. Finnian hesitated, torn between desire and propriety. I should get back. Dawn comes early, and there's much to prepare if Rawlins is planning what I think he is. Disappointment flickered across her features, but she nodded in understanding. Tomorrow, then, after my evening performance. Tomorrow, he agreed, lifting her hand to his lips in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and perfectly right. As he turned to leave, she called after him softly. Finn. He looked back, his heart quickening at the way she said his name. Be careful. These men, I have a feeling they want more than just the mine payroll. Her insight struck him like a physical blow. You're right, he admitted. But how did you know? The way that man looked at you. It wasn't just recognition, it was hatred. Her eyes held genuine concern. Whatever happened between you and Rawlins, it wasn't just business, was it? Finnian sighed. No, it wasn't. But that's a story for another time. As he walked back toward town under the star-filled sky, Finnian couldn't shake the sense that time was something they might not have in abundance. If Rawlins was coming personally for this raid, and Farrell's presence suggested he was, then Galloway Springs was in for a storm unlike anything it had weathered before. The next morning found Sheriff Grant's office crowded with the men who had volunteered to protect the payroll shipment. Most were miners or shopkeepers, with a few experienced ranch hands among them. Finnian, having shared what he knew of the Rawlins Gang's methods, watched their expressions shift from determination to concern. You're saying we should expect 15 to 20 men? One of the miners asked, his face pale beneath his beard. We've only got 11 here, counting you and the sheriff. 12, came a voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see the saloon owner, Samuel Parker, standing there with a shotgun. My place will be their first target after the payroll. I aim to keep what's mine. Sheriff Grant nodded grimly. Appreciate it, Sam. But Ivers is right. We're still outnumbered. Not if we're smart, Finnian interjected. Rawlins expects to find a town unprepared, with the payroll lightly guarded. If we can change those expectations, we might deter them altogether, or make them more determined to teach us a lesson, the sheriff countered. They'll do that anyway if we resist, Finnian said quietly. That's Rawlins' way. Win or lose. He leaves destruction behind him. The room fell silent as the men absorbed this harsh reality. Finally, a weathered rancher spoke up from the back. Then we make sure he loses, and loses big. Enough to think twice before coming after another town. Murmurs of agreement spread through the gathered men. Plans were made, positions assigned, and strategies developed to counter the gang's expected approach. By midday, a semblance of a defense had been organized, centered around making the payroll appear vulnerable while actually fortifying the bank where it would be stored. As the meeting dispersed, Finnian found himself walking alongside Samuel Parker, the saloon owner. Penny says you've crossed paths with Rawlins before, Parker said without preamble. Says that's why his man Farrell was watching her last night. Finnian's steps faltered. Watching her? After you left. He came back, sat outside across the street. Parker's expression was grave. I've known that girl since she got here. Never seen her rattled before, but she was this morning. Worried about you, I think. She shouldn't be, Finnian muttered, though unease crawled through him at the thought of Farrell's attention shifting to Penny. Parker studied him thoughtfully. You know, in the years she's been here, I've never seen her look at any man the way she looks at you. Whatever's between you and Rawlins, don't let it blind you to what's right in front of you. Before Finnian could formulate a response, Parker clapped him on the shoulder and headed back toward his saloon, leaving Finnian with much to consider. The day passed quickly, filled with preparations and planning. Finnian helped position men at strategic points throughout the town, identifying sight lines and potential ambush points. By evening, Galloway Springs had been subtly transformed into something resembling a fortress, though casual observers might not notice the changes. As darkness fell, Finnian found himself drawn once again to the Silver Dollar Saloon. Despite the tension gripping the town, the place was busy, perhaps even more so, as people sought distraction from the coming confrontation. Penny was already performing when he entered, her voice somehow more powerful than before, infused with emotion that seemed to reach into every corner of the room. Her eyes found his immediately, a flash of relief crossing her features before she returned her attention to the song. Finnian secured his usual table, ordering whiskey but barely touching it as he watched her perform. Tonight she wore a dress of deep blue, simpler than her previous costumes, but no less becoming. There was something different about her manner, too, a new intensity, as if each song might be her last. When she finished her first set, she surprised the crowd by announcing a brief intermission. Instead of retreating to the back room as usual, she made her way directly to Finnian's table. You came, she said simply, settling into the chair across from him. I said I would. Her fingers toyed nervously with the small pendant at her throat. Sam told me about the plans, about how dangerous this will be. We're as prepared as we can be, Finnian assured her, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Prepared to fight bandits, yes. But are you prepared to face whatever personal vendetta lies between you and Rawlins? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Penny, no, she interrupted, leaning forward. I need to know, Finn. This isn't just about the payroll, is it? There's something more at stake here, and I can't help feeling that I'm somehow part of it now. The noise of the saloon seemed to fade as Finnian considered how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed. 2 years ago, I tracked 3 of Rawlins' men to a town called Cedar Ridge after they robbed a bank in Tucson. I was working with the local marshal to bring them in. He paused, the memories still fresh despite the passage of time. Rawlins came for his men before we could transport them. Brought his entire gang. The marshal refused to give them up, so Rawlins burned half the town, killed the marshal and his deputy. Finnian's voice grew hollow. I managed to shoot 2 of his men, including his younger brother, before they retreated. Rawlins swore he'd find me, make me watch while he destroyed everything I cared about before killing me. Penny's face had gone pale, but her eyes remained steady on his. And now he's found you. Yes, but I've spent 2 years moving from place to place, never staying long enough to form attachments, never giving him anything to use against me. He reached across the table, taking her hand impulsively. Until now. The implication of his words hung between them, that in just days, she had become someone he cared for, someone Rawlins might target to exact his revenge. "Finn," she began, her voice soft but determined, "I'm not afraid." A commotion at the saloon entrance cut her off. A young boy burst through the doors, his face flushed with exertion. "They're coming," he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Riders spotted on the north road. At least 20 men. The saloon erupted into controlled chaos as the men who had been positioned there grabbed their weapons and moved to their assigned posts. Sheriff Grant appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "It's time," he announced. "Everyone knows what to do. Ivers, you're with me at the bank." Finnian rose, torn between duty and the need to ensure Penny's safety. She solved his dilemma by standing as well, her chin lifted in determination. "Go," she said firmly. "I'll be fine. Sam has a place for me to hide if things go badly." She hesitated, then quickly pressed her lips to his cheek. "But come back to me, Finnian Ivers. We have unfinished business." With that promise burning in his mind, Finnian joined the sheriff and they hurried toward the bank, where the payroll had been secured earlier that day. As they took their positions inside the darkened building, peering out through gaps in the hastily constructed barricades, Sheriff Grant gave him a sidelong glance. "Never figured you for a man to put down roots, Ivers. Not with your reputation." "Neither did I," Finnian admitted, checking his Winchester rifle for the third time. "Miss Keating's a special woman. Whole town adores her." The sheriff's weathered face softened momentarily. "If we make it through this, you could do worse than to consider settling here permanently." Before Finnian could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats silenced both men. The Rawlins Gang had arrived, and Galloway Springs was about to face its greatest test. The riders entered town slowly, deliberately, their torches casting long shadows across the main street. At their head rode Elijah Rawlins himself, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose face bore the scars of countless battles. Beside him, Jackson Farrell pointed toward the bank, clearly identifying it as their primary target. From his position, Finnian could see that the townsfolk had followed his instructions perfectly. The streets appeared deserted, windows darkened, giving the impression of a community cowering in fear. Only when the riders reached the center of town did Sheriff Grant give the signal. Lanterns blazed to life along the boardwalks, revealing armed men positioned on rooftops and behind barricades. The gang found themselves suddenly illuminated, exposed in the killing ground that Finnian had designed. "Rawlins," Sheriff Grant's voice boomed out from beside Finnian. "This town is prepared for you. Turn back now, and no blood need be shed tonight." For a moment, silence reigned as Rawlins assessed the situation. Then his laughter, cold and mocking, echoed down the street. "Prepared," he called back. "You think a few shopkeepers with squirrel guns concern me? I've burned better towns than this to the ground." He turned in his saddle, addressing his men. "Take what you want. Kill anyone who resists. But remember, Ivers is mine." With that, the gang spurred their horses forward, firing wildly as they charged toward the bank and other buildings. The town's defenders responded with disciplined volleys, dropping several riders before they could reach cover. The battle unfolded exactly as Finnian had predicted. Initial confusion as the bandits encountered unexpected resistance, followed by a regrouping as they sought defensible positions from which to mount a counterattack. What he hadn't anticipated was Rawlins' next move. Instead of focusing on the bank, Rawlins led a smaller group directly toward the Silver Dollar Saloon. "He's going after Penny," Finnian realized aloud, his blood running cold. "He must have had a spy in town, someone who saw us together." Sheriff Grant cursed. "We can't leave the payroll undefended." "You don't have to." Finnian was already moving toward the back door. "Hold this position. I'll handle Rawlins." Slipping out into the night, Finnian circled behind the buildings, using the skills his uncle had taught him to move silently through shadows. Gunfire continued to echo throughout the town, but it was growing more sporadic as both sides sought better positions. When he reached the rear of the saloon, he found the door splintered, clearly forced open. Inside, he could hear voices, Rawlins' distinctive drawl among them. "Come out! Come out!" Miss Keating, the bandit leader, was saying. "I know you're Ivers' woman. He took my brother from me. Seems only fair I take something precious from him." Finnian eased inside, keeping low. Through the dim light, he could make out 3 figures searching the main room of the saloon. Samuel Parker lay motionless behind the bar, a spreading pool of blood beneath him. Of Penny, there was no sign. "Check the back rooms," Rawlins ordered one of his men. "Farrell, watch the front. She can't have gone far." As the second man disappeared through the curtain leading to the back rooms, Finnian made his move. Rising from his crouch, he leveled his Colt at Rawlins' back. "Looking for me, Rawlins?" The bandit leader froze, then slowly turned, his scarred face twisting into a grotesque smile. "Ivers, I was wondering when you'd show up. Come to save your songbird." "I came to finish what started in Cedar Ridge," Finnian answered coldly. "This ends tonight." Rawlins' smile widened. "Indeed it does, but not the way you think." He raised his voice slightly. "Farrell." Finnian sensed movement behind him too late. Something hard struck the back of his head, sending him sprawling. His vision blurred as his gun skittered across the floor. "Too predictable, Ivers," Rawlins said, standing over him. "Always rushing in to save others without securing your own position first." Through the haze of pain, Finnian saw Farrell step into view, holding Penny firmly by the arm. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her chin remained defiantly raised. "Found her hiding in the storeroom," Farrell reported, shoving her forward. "Ah, Miss Keating." Rawlins bowed mockingly. "Your reputation as a beauty doesn't do you justice. No wonder Ivers was so quick to come to your rescue." "Let her go, Rawlins," Finnian managed, struggling to his knees. "Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, it is," Rawlins agreed. "But vengeance is sweetest when shared." He drew his pistol, aiming it at Penny's heart. "What was it I promised you, Ivers? That I'd make you watch while I destroyed everything you cared about." Time seemed to slow as Finnian saw Rawlins' finger tighten on the trigger. With a desperate lunge, he threw himself forward, tackling Penny to the ground as the gun roared. Pain blossomed in his shoulder, but he ignored it, rolling them both behind an overturned table as Farrell and Rawlins continued firing. "Finn." Penny's voice was sharp with concern. "You're hit." "Just a graze," he lied, feeling warm blood soaking his shirt. "Stay down." Outside, the gunfire had intensified again, suggesting the town's defenders were pressing their advantage. Rawlins must have realized it too, for his next words carried an edge of desperation. "Burn it down," he ordered Farrell. "Burn the whole damn place with them inside." Farrell moved quickly, overturning a lantern against the bar. The spilled oil caught immediately, flames racing across the wooden floor and up the curtains. Smoke began to fill the room as the fire spread with frightening speed. "We need to move," Finnian told Penny, his mind racing through their limited options. The front door was blocked by flames, and Rawlins and Farrell were between them and the back exit. "There's a trapdoor," Penny whispered urgently. "In the storeroom. It leads to a root cellar and then outside." Finnian nodded, gauging the distance to the curtained doorway that led to the back rooms. "When I move, you run for it. Don't stop, don't look back." "Not without you," she insisted, gripping his arm. "Penny, please, no." Her green eyes flashed with determination. Together or not at all. Before he could argue further, a crash from outside distracted their pursuers. It was the opportunity they needed. Together, they sprinted for the back rooms, ducking under Farrell's wild shot as they plunged through the smoke-filled curtain. The storeroom was already hazy with smoke, but Penny moved unerringly to a corner where a small rug concealed the trapdoor she had mentioned. Finnian helped her lift it, revealing a narrow ladder leading down into darkness. "Go," he urged, hearing heavy footsteps approaching. "I'll be right behind you." This time she obeyed, descending quickly. Finnian followed, pulling the trapdoor shut just as the storeroom door burst open. Above them, muffled by the wooden floor, they could hear Rawlins cursing as the flames drove him back. The cellar was cool and dark, lit only by thin shafts of moonlight penetrating through cracks in the foundation. Penny led the way to a low doorway that opened onto a narrow passage. "It comes out behind the blacksmith shop," she explained. "Sam showed it to me when I first arrived. Said it was left over from when this territory was more dangerous." "Smart man," Finnian murmured, feeling a pang at the memory of the saloon owner's body. They emerged into the night air to find the battle had shifted. The Rawlins Gang was in retreat, having suffered heavy casualties against the town's unexpectedly fierce resistance. The Silver Dollar Saloon was fully engulfed in flames now, its light casting eerie shadows across the main street where bodies lay scattered. Keeping to the shadows, Finnian and Penny made their way toward the bank, where Sheriff Grant and several defenders were gathered. Their arrival was met with relieved exclamations. "Thought you were goners when we saw the saloon go up," the sheriff said, clapping Finnian on his uninjured shoulder. "Rawlins and about half his men are pulling back. The rest won't be bothering anyone again." "Rawlins is still alive?" Finnian asked sharply. "Last I saw, heading north with Farrell and maybe 8 others." The sheriff's expression hardened. "We've got wounded to tend to, Ivers. Going after them now would be foolish." Finnian knew the sheriff was right, but the thought of Rawlins escaping, potentially to return another day, filled him with dread. Before he could respond, however, Penny swayed beside him, her face ashen in the firelight. "Finn," she whispered, her voice faint. "I think I'm not well." Only then did he notice the dark stain spreading across the side of her blue dress, blood, partially concealed by the fabric's color. In the chaos of their escape, he hadn't realized she'd been hit. "Penny." He caught her as her knees buckled, lowering her gently to the ground. "Get the doctor," he shouted, pressing his hand against the wound to stem the bleeding. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. "Don't look so worried," she murmured. "It can't be that bad." "It's not." He lied again, his heart hammering with fear. "Just a scratch. You'll be dancing by tomorrow." A small smile touched her lips. "Liar. You're a terrible liar, Finnian Ivers." The town doctor arrived moments later, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency as he examined the wound. "Bullet went clean through," he reported. "Missed anything vital, from what I can tell. She's lost blood, but with proper care." Finnian barely heard the rest, relief washing over him in a dizzying wave. As they carried Penny to the doctor's house for treatment, he found himself making silent promises to stay, to protect her, to build something lasting in this place that had already come to mean so much to him. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity as the townsfolk tended their wounded and assessed the damage. 4 defenders had been killed, including Samuel Parker, but the Rawlins gang had suffered far worse. 14 bodies were recovered, with blood trails suggesting several more had been wounded before escaping. The Silver Dollar Saloon was a total loss, but the bank remained secure, its payroll intact. As dawn broke over Galloway Springs, the mood was somber but resolute. They had stood against one of the most notorious gangs in the territory and prevailed. Finnian spent the night at Penny's bedside, refusing both treatment for his own wound and the sheriff's suggestion that he rest. Only when she woke, her color improved and her eyes clear, did he allow himself to relax slightly. "You stayed," she said softly, reaching for his hand. "Of course I stayed." He clasped her fingers gently. "Where else would I be?" "Chasing Rawlins." It wasn't an accusation, merely an observation. Finnian shook his head. "There are more important things than vengeance." She studied him carefully. "You've never said that before, have you?" "No," he admitted. "But nearly losing you. It changes a man's perspective." A smile touched her lips. "Does that mean you're planning to stay in Galloway Springs, Mr. Ivers?" "If they'll have me." He hesitated, then added softly, "If you'll have me." Her answer was in her eyes before she spoke. "I think that could be arranged." 3 days later, Finnian stood with Sheriff Grant at the edge of town, watching as a group of riders approached from the east, the mine payroll escort, arriving after the danger had passed. "Might have been useful to have them here earlier," Grant observed dryly. "We managed," Finnian replied, "and the town proved itself stronger than anyone expected." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of the town, had an interesting conversation with some of the business owners this morning. They're talking about rebuilding the saloon, making it bigger. Proper theater space for Miss Keating to perform. She'd like that. They want to offer you a position too. Town marshal." Grant's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Seems folks were impressed by how you organized our defense. Pays not much, but it comes with living quarters above the new marshal's office they're planning to build." Finnian was momentarily speechless. I'm not sure I'm qualified." "Son, you faced down the Rawlins gang and lived to tell about it. That's qualification enough for most folks around here." The sheriff paused. "Besides, Miss Keating made it clear she's not leaving Galloway Springs, and I get the feeling you're not inclined to leave her." "No," Finnian agreed softly. "I'm not." Later that evening, as the setting sun painted the desert in the same amber hues that had greeted his arrival just a week earlier, Finnian walked with Penny along the edge of town. Her wound was healing well, though she still moved with careful deliberation. "The sheriff told me about the marshal position," she said as they paused to watch the sunset. "Will you accept it?" Finnian gazed out at the horizon. "I've spent most of my life moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots, never letting myself want more than the next bounty, the next trail. And now," her question hung in the air between them, filled with possibility. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Now I find myself wanting things I never thought possible. A home, a purpose beyond vengeance, someone to share it all with." Penny's eyes glistened in the fading light. "Finn, I know it's too soon," he hurried on. "We've known each other barely a week. But when I thought I might lose you in that saloon, Penny, I realized some things don't need time to be certain." "Like what?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Like knowing I love you." The words, once spoken, felt like the most natural truth he'd ever uttered. "Like knowing I want to build a life here, with you, if you'll have me." Her answer came not in words, but in action as she rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a promise of all that might lie ahead. When they finally parted, her smile outshone the desert stars just beginning to appear overhead. "I think Marshal Ivers has a nice ring to it," she murmured. "And yes, Finnian Ivers, I will have you. Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow." As word spread through Galloway Springs that the famous bounty hunter had agreed to become their marshal, and that Penny Keating had consented to be his wife, the town's mood lifted from somber determination to genuine celebration. The mine owner offered to fund the rebuilding of the saloon as a proper theater, ensuring Penny would continue to have a stage for her talents. 3 months later, with the new theater and marshal's office nearing completion, Finnian and Penny were married in a simple ceremony attended by the entire town. As they exchanged vows beneath the same stars that had witnessed their first walk together, both knew their story was just beginning. Elijah Rawlins remained at large, his diminished gang having faded into the vast territories beyond Galloway Springs. But his shadow no longer darkened Finnian's thoughts as it once had. There would always be dangers in this untamed land, always threats to face and challenges to overcome. But facing them together, with a community that had proven its courage and resilience, made all the difference. In Penny's love, Finnian had found something he hadn't known he was searching for, not just a reason to stay, but a reason to live fully, beyond the narrow confines of vengeance and solitude. And in Finnian's steadfast devotion, Penny had found the adventure her heart had always craved, not in endless wandering, but in building something lasting and true in this wild, beautiful place they now called home. As the newly appointed Marshal and Mrs. Ivers walked arm in arm through the streets of Galloway Springs, their future stretched before them like the vast desert horizon, full of promise, possibility, and the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together.